Okay, hello and welcome to another episode of Wordspace Radio. I'm Billy, and joining me in the studio today is Megan.
Hi.
Ethan.
Hello.
And special guest Martyn Bedford.
Hello.
How's it going, Martyn?
Yeah, very good, thank you. Very nice to be sitting here in a smart little studio.
Yeah, it's good stuff, isn't it?
Yeah,
We've been
yeah.
on about having you on the show for a while, so glad we've got the chance to do it.
Yeah, you've run out of more interesting people, so it's my turn now.
I hope not, because we've only had like 7 people.
That's as many interesting people as there are in the building, obviously. Yeah.
That would be so depressing,
Yeah.
wouldn't it? The show's over. We've literally interviewed everyone with a personality.
Just start dragging people in off the streets then, couldn't you?
Oh, we did that last week.
Yeah, we did. Yeah.
We had an out of the uni guest.
Right.
Yeah, so that was cool. So unfortunately, you're not the first published writer that we've.
Oh, never mind. Okay. Not the
But
first, but
I think you're the most published writer.
oh no, well that's okay. I'm happy to settle for that as long as there's some sort of success story going with it. Yeah.
That's it. As long as you got something that makes you feel unique.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I'm not interested in quality; it's quantity that counts, isn't it, with writing? You know?
That's not
Tip
what
for
you
the writers out
us,
there.
but
Yeah.
okay.
Thank God this isn't being recorded. Yeah.
Brilliant. Okay. How are you guys? Not to ignore you both.
Oh, I'm fine, thank
Yeah,
you.
great. I'm excited for the podcast today.
Awesome stuff. Do you want to tell us a little bit about what you got for us today, Martyn?
Well, I thought I'd read something that hasn't been published yet, rather than stuff that's already out there. Usually at these sort of things you tend to talk about books that are already there, but I thought given that this is a creative writing course that I'm teaching here and people are producing work in progress, I thought it'd be more interesting for me to read some of my work in progress and share that rather than go for the published thing. So I'm going to read to you an extract from the novel that's coming out next spring, which is called 20 Questions for Gloria. And that's finished and edited and done now, and they're just going through the production process. So, but it's I've only ever read it aloud once before at a Wordspace open mic, and that's the only time it's been aired in public. So this will be the sort of the second time, really.
That's really exciting. That's
Fantastic.
awesome. So we've got a bit of an exclusive.
Yeah,
Yeah,
it's exciting.
yeah.
I like it. Do you want to tell us anything about what this book's going to be about?
Yeah, I can do, because the bit I'm going to read is from a little way into the novel, so I should probably talk a little bit about it to put it into context. It's the story. It's called 20 Questions for Gloria, and the central character, unsurprisingly, is called Gloria. There's the kind of clue in the title there, really, isn't it? And it's a story about a girl who is 15 years old. She's bored and restless and unhappy with her life, and at that sort of stage that a lot of teenagers go through, of there must be more to life than this, of just turning up to school, doing the schoolwork, going home, living with boring mum and dad, doing the usual sort of stuff. And she started to get a bit disillusioned with her friendships, and just is looking for something to sort of brighten up or enliven her life or make it more interesting. She's sort of ripe for an adventure. So we join her at the start of the novel where she's in that situation, and then a new boy starts at the school, and she thinks is this potential spark that might ignite her life and make it more interesting. So he turns up at the school, and she sees him as all the things she isn't. He's the reckless, adventurous one, the one who says what he likes and doesn't care what people think of him, who gives the teacher's cheek, who just does what he wants, really. If he feels like turning up to classes, he will do. If he doesn't, he won't. So she sort of attaches herself to him as her ticket out of her boring existence, if you like. But there's a sort of secret backstory to him that she isn't aware of, and the storyline is, without giving too much away, that they go on the run together. And only when she's on the run with him does she realise that actually he's not all that he seems, and perhaps she shouldn't have got in with him in the first place. And then their sort of adventures unfold from there. So that's probably as much as I should say without giving the whole story away, rendering the complete publication of it pointless, because everyone will know what it's about, really.
No, I think you've told just enough to spark an interest in some people, hopefully, because that sounds really cool to me.
Yeah.
Certainly sounds like you've got some ideas for characters that'll be relatable, which is always.
Yeah, well, I'm writing for teenagers, so I don't know what you were like when you were 14, 15 years old, but I certainly remember times when I thought, God, my life is so boring. I just wish I could do something more interesting and exciting. But the one thing about being a writer is you've got a chance to give your characters the opportunity to do the things that you didn't quite have the nerve to do when you were that age, you know. So.
Yeah, absolutely. Me as a teenager was probably a little bit wanted to be more like your rebellious character, and in actual fact was just a massive dork.
Yeah.
Yeah, we talked about Catcher in the Rye the other day, didn't we? Because I only read that recently, like a few months ago, whereas Billy read that when he was when he was around the age of
I
a
was
rebellious
15
teenager.
when I read it, and I remember
Yeah.
really relating to it and thinking it was just the most genius book, and feeling like Holden Caulfield
Yeah.
was similar to me in some way, and I've read it since and grown up and been like, wow,
Yeah.
he's the git.
Well, I'm sure there's a bit of Holden Caulfield and J.D. Salinger behind this book, actually, because
Yeah.
that was one of my, the when you move on from reading children's fiction to reading adult fiction, his was one of the first books I read, that
Yeah.
sort of coming of age story, and I'm sure subconsciously there's a lot of that Holden Caulfield characters coming through in Gloria and her mate Uman when they go on the run together. So I mean that's the sort of the ultimate, even though it's sort of 1950s, was that published, 1940s
so.
even, it still doesn't feel dated, does it? I mean, in some ways it does, but I reread it a year or two ago and it still feels relevant to what teenage experience seems to be like now. So
Oh, good stuff. Okay, I think it's nicely timed that you can start your reading if you like.
it's almost like we planned that, isn't it? It's like the whole thing was building towards that. Yeah. Okay, well I'll read to you as a few pages, maybe about 5, 6, 7 minutes of reading time. So hopefully that's just enough, but not too long.
Perfect.
That's fine.
Okay, so this is a little way into the book, maybe a chapter or two in, and this is when Uman, the new boy that I mentioned, turns up at school for the first time. It was a regular Monday morning at school, and the tutor room was lively. Start of the week blues drowned out by the chatter of what did you do at the weekend. Mr. Brunt had just taken the register. The windows were open, letting in the drone of a lawnmower from the school field and the scent of cut grass. It had set off Tierney's hay fever. Even with red eyes and a snotty nose, she's still pretty, like a grief-stricken princess. She sneezed 3 times, all over our desk. "Thank you for sharing those with us, Tierney," Mr. Brunt said. "If you have any more lined up, please turn round. The chaps in the back row missed out that time." I'd like to say there was a sign, an omen, sunlight bathing the room in a strange aura, a blue butterfly fluttering in through the open window and settling on my sleeve, but there was nothing like that. I don't recall what I was thinking about. Forgotten homework, probably, or whether Mum had signed my planner, or my mood. Switched off, I expect, wishing away the day, the week. But it seems bizarre that those moments weren't electrified with anticipation. Mr. Brunt clapped his hands, as he always does ahead of class announcements. As usual, he followed the clap with, "Right then, 10GB, listen up." The whole time he's been our form tutor, Mr. Brunt has worn nothing but variations of brown. Suits, ties, shoes, socks, the occasional sweater, even his white shirts have turned beige. He must have been teaching since the days when desks had inkwells. He barely got started on his announcements that morning. The door opened just then, and a boy let himself into the room. Tall and gangly thin, with very black, very fine, very straight hair down to his shoulders. Dusky in a Mediterranean meets the Indian subcontinent kind of way. But for his height, his boy-sized nose and the scruffy stubble on his chin and upper lip, he might have passed for a girl. It wasn't just the long hair. There was something feminine in his manner and the way he moved, a kind of grace. His school uniform was way too small for him, exposing 2 stripes of hairy shin and a pair of knobbly wrists encircled in numerous multicoloured bangles. He hadn't knocked before coming in. Mr. Brunt wouldn't like that. "Who'd he?" Tierney whispered through hay-feverish nostrils. Not a, "Wow, he's cute, who's he?" More of a, "Who's this freak?" 1 or 2 people sniggered. He was tall enough to be year 12 or 13, but he wouldn't have been in uniform if that was the case. I didn't recognise him anyway, and I'm sure I'd have remembered him if I'd seen him around school. The guy showed no trace of self-consciousness. Head held high, he surveyed the room with an easy confidence. "Shall we try that again, young man?" Mr. Brunt said. I thought he was going to ignore the question. At last, with a half smile, he turned to the tutor. "Try what again, sir?" Posh-spoken, polite. If he had any idea what he'd done wrong, he didn't show it. Mr. Brunt was a few centimetres shorter and seemed displeased by having to look up at him, as if the boy was to blame for it. The teacher pointed. "The door?" The new arrival looked genuinely perplexed. "What about it?" "I'd like you to knock on it before entering my tutor room." "But I'm already in your tutor room." Then could you please go back out, knock on the door, and come in when I say so? I could very easily do all of those things, but if you don't mind me saying so, sir, it would be a poor use of my time, and yours for that matter. An odd sound escaped Mr. Brunt's mouth. The rest of us were utterly silent and still. The boy continued, You've already established that you prefer people to knock before entering. Fine, point made, I'll know for next time. So what you're doing now is attempting to assert your authority over me through a process of ridicule. He shrugged. So, no. Just like that. No. I didn't dare breathe or so much as glance at Tierney, sure if I caught her eye I'd burst out laughing. In any case, I couldn't tear my gaze from the two figures at the front, face to face like boxers at the start of a fight, or lovers in a TV drama. That was it. There was no aggression in the boy's tone or body language. He was relaxed, almost seductive. As I sat there enthralled, I pictured him leaning forward to kiss Mr. Brunt on the lips. As if he'd had the exact same thought, the form tutor took a half step backwards. Unlike some teachers, Mr. Brunt doesn't tend to lose his temper with us, individually or as a group. I don't think I've heard him shout, not properly, but we know where he draws the line, and there's no doubt when we've crossed it. That morning, though, he seemed bewildered, a confused old man who'd gone walkabout from a care home and somehow found himself in a room full of teenagers. This is totally, young man, I want you to... He must have started the sentence 10 times. Then he gave up trying to get the words out, simply stood there, shoulders sagging, head tilted to look up into the boy's face, as if awaiting further instructions. It was shocking to see him like that. The boy rescued him. We haven't got off on the right foot, have we, sir? He said, still wearing that half smile. He offered his hand. Hello, I'm Uman. You must be Mr. Brunt. The form tutor stared at the hand like he'd never seen one before. Maybe he'd noticed all those bangles, a flagrant breach of school dress code, and was debating whether to confront the boy about that too. Uman, he repeated. Padim, Uman Padim. Mr. Brunt frowned, took the hand, shook it, at least allowed his own to be shaken. Still holding the teacher's hand, Uman Padim said, I'm the new boy. I've seen the effect Uman has on people many times since then, but that morning it was almost literally unbelievable, as if the episode had been staged with the form tutor and the new boy in cahoots to play a practical joke on the class. What's wrong with Brunt? I whispered to Tierney. She just shook her head. Tier, he looks like he's been drugged. Or hypnotized. Or what? Hypnotized. That's what I thought you said. In the hours and days that followed, this was one of the theories that Uman Padim's effect, that he had cast a hypnotic spell over people. In that tutor room, though, all we could do was watch, bemused, awestruck, as Mr. Brunt capitulated. New boy, he said. I wasn't informed. Let me check if I have... He went over to his desk and fumbled at his computer. You sure you're meant to be... Ah, yes, here we are. When he'd finished reading, he stood up, straightened his tie, studied Uman with the strangest expression. I know what it conveyed now, but back then I couldn't read it at all. Well, he said, raising a hand towards the rows of desks, you'd better join us, Uman. He spoke the name as if testing it. And, welcome to 10GB. Thank you, sir. Whatever he'd read on that PC, the confrontation over Uman's failure to knock before entering the room was no longer an issue. The new boy had defied the teacher spectacularly and got clean away with it. I'd have expected him to look smug. Most of the other boys in the class would have taken their seat with a smirk and a swagger if they'd pulled a stunt like that. Uman, though, had erased all trace of a smile from his lips. If anything, he looked sorry for Mr. Brunt. There's a spare seat by the window, the form tutor said, pointing, next to Luke. Uman Padim glanced in that direction. Then he cast his gaze about the room as he'd done when he first came in. This time he seemed to look more closely, as if assessing us one by one. His attention settled on our desk, first on Tierney, then me, then Tierney again. I am so used to that. He can only have looked at me for a couple of seconds, but it felt longer. His face gave nothing away. I willed myself not to break eye contact. Who the hell do you think you are? I distinctly recall having that thought as he stared at me. He might have messed with Mr. Brunt's head, but he wasn't going to mess with mine. The odd thing was that during his visual trawl of the room, none of us said a word. Mr. Brunt, too, simply stood patiently beside him, waiting for him to finish whatever he was doing. What was he doing? I'm not sure any of us knew, but despite its bizarreness, there seemed to be a general acceptance that he was perfectly entitled to do it. Eventually, Uman moved. With a long-legged stride that somehow managed to be both ungainly and graceful at the same time, he picked a route between the desks, until he came to ours, specifically to Tierney's half of it, of course. "Hello," he said to Tierney. "What's your name?" "Tierney." "Well, Tierney, would you mind—" "Her name's Tierney," I cut in, with an N. Uman looked at me with that half-smile in place again, then back at Tier. "Tierney, can I ask you to sit over there with Luke, please?" Her expression was priceless. "Are you having a larp?" "Is she speaking Danish?" Uman asked me. "Hay fever," I said. "That's a language? Wow, we never got past Latin and Mandarin at my last school." That was actually quite funny, but no way was I going to show it. Anyway, who learns Latin these days, and what kind of school offers Mandarin? I looked at Mr. Brunt, wondering if he would intervene. Clearly not. Like the rest of the class, he just watched the scene unfold, as if fascinated to see how it would end. "So, Tierney with an N," Uman nodded at the empty seat next to Luke. "How about it?" "Go away, why should I have to boob?" "Because your friend looks by far the most interesting person in the room, and with all due respect to Luke, I'd prefer to sit with her." Uman Padim brought many surprises to 10GB that morning, but none greater than this. Tierney collected up her stuff and went over to sit with Luke.
Wonderful stuff, thank you, Martyn.
Thank you.
That was fantastic.
Enjoyed
I was
that.
holding in a sneeze all the way through that, and now it's gone.
That's quite an impressive feat to hold in a sneeze for that long. Yeah.
It was around page 3. But no, that was awesome. Thank you very
Thank you,
much.
yeah.
Thanks for that.
Well, so I always feel a bit nervous reading unpublished stuff because it's sort of a bit untested, really. So it's quite nice to get a chance to do that. And I expect you to do that all the time with my classes. So it seems a bit unfair for me to ask students to produce work in progress when I don't produce it myself.
Yeah, you were annoyingly not nervous though. Which
Yeah. Well, inside it's the whole duck's feet flapping underwater, and on top you can.
Could have preferred to have seen a bit more shaking.
Well, I could have tried that. I didn't want to make a noise with the paper, you see. So yeah.
Fair enough.
But yeah, I really enjoyed that. Like, you're the teacher. You all know our writing styles, and I'm sort of wanting to go into writing teenage fiction.
Yeah,
like
well, we've sort of chatted about that before, haven't we? So.
And it's right up my alley, and I thought it was really funny, and I loved the hay fever, voice. I thought that was hilarious. That was
Well, it's good fun writing those. I like writing dialogue anyway, and particularly when there's a bit of comedy to it. I quite like that.
Love it too. Yeah.
Bit of banter. And teenage fiction. I mean, you'll know this because if you're planning on writing it, you'll have been reading a fair bit of it as well. But teenage fiction particularly is very dialogue driven, more so than adult fiction. So you do need good dialogue scenes in there and good sort of snappy stuff going on between the characters, don't you?
Yeah, I thought the hay fever was a really nice touch, just to add a little bit more personality in, like something I probably wouldn't have thought of. I'd have just had what was that character's name? Sorry, Tierney.
Yeah.
I'd have probably just had her speaking regular. It wouldn't have occurred to me to just it just adds something quite nice and extra.
Well, yeah, I don't know where that idea came from, because I think originally I might have written that scene a bit straighter than that, and she might not have had hay fever at the outset. But I remember when I was at school in the sort of spring when they'd be cutting the grass in the school grounds and the windows were open, I used to get I wasn't hay feverish, but I used to get quite asthmatic, and I was really conscious of that affecting me. So it suddenly goes to me as I was writing the scene, that might add a little extra something to it, particularly if it's the pretty one that everyone fancies who gets the hay fever, and the girl next to her is the one who doesn't get it. I quite like the idea of someone who seems to be perfect and everyone thinks she's great, but there's some flaw in her that means she isn't always great, although she's still infuriatingly manages to look pretty even when she's got a red nose and her eyes are watering, So.
It really brought it to life, the whole, because we've not been out of high school for that long, and
I have.
You have.
I feel like I have.
True, you're a bit older than us. But even when I go home and I see my sister coming home from school, there's people exactly like that. They all seem to have these bangles all up their arms, and wacky hairstyles because they're sort of finding themselves, and it just, all of it was really like vivid.
Well, that's at that age, I don't know if you found this, but that age is when you start leaving childhood behind and you're not quite ready to go into adulthood yet. And you're 14, 15, you're still technically and legally a child, and adults still regard you and treat you as a child, but you begin to start seeing yourself as an adult. So you start pushing those boundaries, don't you? What can I get away with in terms of breaching the uniform without getting into real trouble over it? How far can I push it? How can I do my hair, or how can I behave? And it's amazing how creative you can be with a school uniform, how many variations there can be with everyone wearing technically the same stuff,
I could tell you some ridiculous stories. Like I used to go to school in corpse paint. Yeah, you like Cradle of Filth. I used to paint my face white. And
did you get away with it, or did you have to go
times.
Did you have to go and wash it off in the?
Yeah, it was a bit hit and miss. I liked the days when I got sent home, because you got sent home.
was that your cunning plan all along, was to get sent home from school?
I don't know. It was a ridiculously over the top goth phase that lingered far too long.
That is maybe today's young generation are pushing the limits more than they were when I was. Because none of my friends at school would have ever risked doing something like that.
Yeah, it was a strange decision. I thought I probably wasn't getting bullied enough, so I thought, what a great idea. Just
why not?
Slap some eyeliner on and
draw
skinny
attention
jeans.
to yourself.
Great idea.
But I suppose that in a way that you might as well go down that route, because you do get picked on at school for whatever. People will find a weakness or a perceived imperfection and they'll home in on it, won't they? Because school kids can be really cruel. I mean, I virtually ticked all the boxes when I had ginger hair when I was a kid, and it's hard to believe now when there's none left. I had ginger hair. I had a dental brace for quite a while. I used to wear a pair of glasses with one lens that had sellotape over it to try and strengthen that eye. I wasn't overweight, but I was ridiculously skinny as well. So just all the reasons why you could get the sort of fun taken out of you were there. And in some ways you're better off almost making a point of it, aren't you, and going down the corpse paint route and saying, well, here I am, I don't care what you think of me, But it's tough, isn't it, when you're 14, 15, it's quite, as an adult, I was talking to Jenny about this in the session earlier on when she did the interview bit with me, and she was saying that she used to get really upset by the way people would use horrible nicknames to her when she was at school, and now she's 27 and got a daughter and has grown up a bit more. She says those sort of things don't bother her now, but when you're 14 and 15 it can really be crushing, can't it?
Everything matters when you're 15 and 14. It's like the smallest thing, even if it's not meant as like a go at you, you just take it and you're like, oh, that's true. The worst thing in the world.
When you're a teenager, it's like everything's like cranked up to 100, isn't it? And just if you fall in love, you fall in love on 100. Or if you hate, so if you get into an argument, you don't just get annoyed at someone, you hate them forever, and they're the worst human, or and stuff you love as well. Like
it's all full on,
mad, passionate. You can't just like a band casually.
They're either the best band there ever has been, or they're the worst band.
And I will fight you if you don't like the same band.
And that the whole falling in and falling out of love thing, everything seems cataclysmic, doesn't it? It's when you fall in love, no one's ever been in love like that before, and you're more in love than anyone has ever been. And then when it all breaks up and goes wrong, it's the worst any breakup has ever been.
Yeah, you're the only one that's ever felt that way. Yeah. It's nice in a way, isn't it?
Well, it's sort of, I mean, in a way, that's what, as an adult, you lose that. I quite like that ability to respond in an extreme way to things. And
we had this exact conversation about music the other day, didn't we? Like, we both used to be passionate about music, like, well, still sort of are, but like, you used to have a favourite band and you're like, oh yes, and you find a new band and you're like, oh, they're amazing. But now, new films and like music that come out, you just sort of like, I'll give it a listen.
It's I'm still very appreciative of these things, but you don't have that teenage kind of crazy, over the top. As soon as you hear one song, that's it. You skip the rest of class, go home, download every album.
Buy everything.
I don't know. I've not found. It's a strange thing, isn't it?
I suppose the more books you read, the more films you see, the more music you listen to, the less surprised you are by things, because you've seen most of it before. But when you're a teenager, you're often coming across this stuff for the first time, aren't you?
I guess.
I mean, I've become like that with books now. I remember when I really got into reading when I was at school, of discovering every author was a new author, every book was a new book. And now I'm sort of 55, so I've been reading for 40 odd years, and it's really hard to come across a book that does something you've never come across before, or an author that you've never heard of before. So it's a natural process, but in some ways it's quite sad that you lose that ability to respond so full on to things, I think.
It must be nice though, writing teen fiction, to know that you know, likely anybody who's going to read your book, they're going to have the strong teenage-ish reaction to it.
Yeah,
you know what I mean?
Well, I mean, I didn't plan to write for teenage. I'd written 5 novels for adults before writing Flip, which is my first teenage novel. And I didn't have a career plan, but I am now going to switch to writing for teenagers. And it was just, I had this idea that seemed to lend itself to being a teenage novel. I mean, it's for people who haven't read it, it's the story of a boy who wakes up and his soul or his spirit, his psyche is transferred from his body to the body of another boy during the night. And that was me remembering, as I said earlier, about all the things, the ginger hair, the glasses, the dental braces, the skinniness. And I remember really wishing I looked different. I really wished I looked like my best friend, who was all the things I wasn't. He was the good-looking one, the sporty one, the one that the girls fancied. And I remember really envying the way he looked and wishing I could look like him. So when I was although I'm writing for teenage readers, what I was really doing was tapping into my memory of being a teenager myself, because clearly it's a long time since I've been a teenager. And I think when I was talking to some other adults who write for teenagers the other day, I was at a book awards event in Hull, and they were saying the same thing, that they're all, you know, I think the youngest one was 32, there's a guy who was in his 60s and a guy in his 40s and another woman in her 40s, so none of us were teenagers. And we were all saying it's trying to remember what it was like to be a teenager that we're drawing on in our fiction, and just hoping it strike a chord with modern teenagers. And I do think, although the technology's changed, I mean, the culture's different, the sort of gadgets kids have now is different to what we had. We had no, you know, iPhones or emails or instant messaging or iPads or all the social network stuff that teenagers have got now. But I think the basic emotional journey that you go through as a teenager isn't that different. You know, the hormonal changes, the physical changes, the relationships with friends and family and teachers. So I'm sort of hoping that there's a sort of continuity of teenage experience that adult authors can tap into, you know.
Yeah, I'd say so for sure, really.
And what is it that appeals to you about writing for teenagers then, Nathan? Is that?
It's more the dialogue aspect, like you said, because I feel like that's my strongest point. But I like that style. I like sort of witty dialogue back and forth rather than, you know, big like epic descriptions of a tree.
Yes.
Where they're sat. I like the comedy aspect of like back and forth, and I don't know, like I feel there's less room for cynicism when you're reading teenage fiction, because it's more about the feelings and the experience, whereas a lot of the times, like in 20th century literature, it's a bit different, but we're reading books and it's like you really have to be critical of it, and I feel like adult novels now, you know, people are sort of, oh, that's not as good as that, whereas with teenage fiction, it's more, if it strikes something in a teenager, then they're going to spread it around a lot faster. Yeah,
and I think that the word cynicism you use there is a key to it as well, because I think one of the processes of getting older is to become more cynical or more sceptical, or just a bit more weary of the world, because you've been there and done that so many times over, that life, as we were saying about books and film and music, life throws up fewer surprises, and it's hard not to get more cynical and sceptical, and that you don't tend to get that in teenagers, because everything is possible. Most of their life is unfolding ahead of them rather than behind them, so that gives you a different perspective, and that forward-looking sort of optimism and lack of cynicism is really refreshing, isn't it? And it's really good fun to write for that kind of readership. I mean, I have to be really careful not to be a grumpy old man when I'm writing teenage fiction. You know, I do all my moaning at home in front of my wife and kids about the government or the state of buses or whatever it might be that I'm grumpy about, but I try not to let the grumpiness spill over into my teenage fiction. You know?
That's what I like about it as well. Like we've had a thing, and recently, like, we're doing Love in writing practices, and everyone was so cynical about it and just absolutely ripping into it.
It shocked me how negative everyone's perspective on love has been at such a young age. I mean, we're all 19, 20 year olds and have all been going, well, it's silly and it's rubbish. And
I think it becomes like the cool thing to hate love. Like, you read all these teenage fiction things, and then as you start to grow out of it, you say, oh, well, I can't like that anymore, I might as well just say I hate it.
Yeah.
Well, that's a very true thing about moving through sort of early to mid-teens to later teens, is you do start drawing a line under things that it's acceptable to find cool, isn't it? You know, you go through that phase of being too cool for school, don't you? But when you're in year 7 and year 8, you're really enthusiastic and up for school, and by year 9 and year 10, you want to draw a line under that, and school's a waste of time. And I'll sit here and stare sulkily at the teacher for an hour and see what they do with it, you know. But yeah, you're right, that sort of leaving love behind, you know. It says The Fault in Our Stars, John Green, which was hugely successful, teenage novel. I imagine by the time you get to sort of 16, you're probably thinking, right, I shouldn't find that book brilliant anymore. It's all right when I'm 15, but when I'm 16, I should move on from that. You know.
I loved James' guilty pleasure.
Yeah.
I know I probably shouldn't admit it, but like...
Well, that was a real tear-jerking love story, and really good witty bantery dialogue.
Yeah,
as
he's
well,
fantastic.
It was a nice book. I mean, it wasn't like, you know, D.H. Lawrence or master class, but it was lovely. It entertained me for a night or two.
Yeah.
And that's what it's about at the end of the day, isn't it? Like it's got to be nice to be able to write the really deep and difficult stuff, and then to have a break sometimes and write something that is just purely meant to be entertainment, because that's why people read. Really, we don't read to pontificate and be pretentious.
No, I mean, occasionally it's a bit like TV. Occasionally you want to watch a Channel 4 documentary, but more often than not you want to watch something that's going to entertain you, don't you? But every now and then you dip into something more serious. And I think readers are similar to that. And the thing with teenage fiction as well, I found, because when I was a teenager, there wasn't really a teenage fiction genre. You know, you went straight from children's fiction to adult with not very much in between, apart from a bit of sci-fi, really, and then Catcher in the Rye when you got old enough to read it.
Hard to believe now, isn't it?
Yeah, it's the phenomenon in publishing now, that sector. So the thing I've completely forgotten why I was even starting that sentence. Now this is another thing that doesn't happen to you when you're a teenager. When you're my age, you do start a sentence and then forget where you were going with it. No, I know what I was going to say. Is that you can actually get some serious stuff into teenage fiction without it seeming too sort of heavy-handed, really. You can use the relationships and the plot and the sort of fun entertainment stuff and work through some interesting themes and ideas along the way, which The Fault in Our Stars does, doesn't it? I mean, it's a good, fun, entertaining read and a good romance, but there's some really quite heavy stuff there about terminal illness, you know, which if you're doing that in an adult novel, you'd probably deal with it quite differently.
Yeah, because there's more scope for it in a teenage novel, because you can be more light-hearted about it, because throw in a load of heavy stuff about, like, Fault in Our Stars. If you just went into detail about cancer and, you know, the absolute how heartbreaking it is, I don't think it would be as entertaining for a teenager.
No.
Like, it'd put you off a bit.
I think that's the difference. That's the challenge, I suppose, if you write for that readership, is to write something that they want to turn the pages and find out what happens next, and they want to get involved with the characters, and they are entertained and enjoy reading the book, but they're also having their thoughts provoked a bit along the way, you know, and it's getting that balance right, really, because there's nothing teenagers hate more when they read. I mean, I go into a lot of schools and do talks and readings and Q&A sessions, and it's quite apparent that what they really don't like is being preached to. They hate books where they think the adult author is trying to tell them how to think or how to behave or what they should, how they should respond to things. So you have to be really careful not to do that when you're writing for that age of readership.
I think they probably also, there'll be a large element of them looking out for, are you writing about this because you expect we'll like it?
Yeah. Well, there is that as well.
And tried to not get involved in that. So I like what you've done with this one. It's where it's such a classic, tried and true formula, really. The cool guy comes in and is, you know, amazingly strange to the rather shy girl, I suppose. But you've already, you can tell in what you've read, you've done a different twist on it.
Well, that was my plan, because I'm aware it's a fairly formulaic setup, and you know, that idea that there are only 7 plots in the world, and every novel is a variation of those 7 plots, or every film is a variation. I mean, as The Stranger Comes to Town is one of those, and here effectively as A Stranger Comes to School. So it's the same setup that you see in a lot of adult fiction as well. But as you say, the key thing then is to try and give it an original twist and make it go somewhere different. And the same with Flip, the body swap story. There have been plenty of novels about people swapping bodies. So the challenge there was to come up with a new approach. So yeah, well, I suppose that's true of any fiction, really, isn't it? Is readers like something that they can recognise as being within a certain set of parameters, that if they like crime fiction, it's recognisably a crime novel. But they also don't want it to be like every other crime novel I've ever read. So whatever form you're writing in, you've got that challenge of making it recognisable but also different, haven't you?
Yeah. It's hard, isn't it? Because even when you're writing or you're looking for something, you want to make this new idea and you want it to be different, but then you don't want it to be too unfamiliar that people aren't going to recognise it as sort of a genre, because then people might not even bother with it. Like, back to Fault in Our Stars again, if I didn't know who the author already was, I don't think I would have gone into a bookshop seen a love story about a girl with cancer, I don't think I would have picked that up.
But that's interesting.
It's just when you actually read it, it's completely different. So it goes back to like the hay fever stuff, bringing it alive, and you know the witty back and forth. It sets it apart from the other parts.
Yeah, right from that very first conversation that the two characters have in the Fault in Our Stars, I was really hooked then. So the sort of banter between them and the way they sort of do and don't get on initially, I thought it was really cleverly done.
Yeah.
Just a random question: was Mr. Brunt based on anybody for real life in particular?
Well, I've written sort of about teachers before. I put teachers into books before for adults and for teenagers. And the first one I wrote, my first adult novel, was called Axe to Revision, and that was the story of a psychologically disturbed man in his 30s who tracks down his former teachers and takes revenge on them. So I've always had this thing about teachers. But in that book, I was aware that I didn't want any of the teachers to be recognisable as themselves. So for legal reasons, you know. So what I did, and I did this with Mr. Brunt as well, I would take an aspect of one teacher that I remembered, and an aspect of another, and an aspect of another, and then sort of merge them together into one combined hybrid character who might have Mr. Brunt's dress sense, but I've changed gender and then I've given him a different subject to teach. So it's like a hybrid of 2 or 3 teachers rather than one particular teacher, which avoids you getting sued, really.
It's always a bonus.
Good thing, it's always a bonus.
Yeah, whenever you're writing a book, it's just kind of best not to be sued.
I mean, writing's not a great way of earning a huge amount of money unless you're John Green or Anthony Horowitz or Jacqueline Wilson or J.K. Rowling, but for most writers you don't earn huge sums of money, and what you do earn you certainly don't want to pay out in legal fees and
yes, you don't want to be hemorrhaging your earnings with lawsuits.
Absolutely not. No. We should do a session in our modules just on that, how to avoid getting sued as an author.
Is that a genuine problem, do you reckon, for a lot of authors?
Well, it does happen from time to time. I mean, there tend to be quite high profile cases because it's not that common. Usually, you know, recognisable mainstream publishers have a legal team who would cast their eye. When the first thing they do when they've edited your book is to look for any potential things that might cause problems, because they're worried about publishers get sued as well as the author, so they're worried that they're going to lose money. So if you're with a good publisher, they will check for that and they'll run it past their legal people and they will tell you if there are any issues. I've not come across that. I wanted to use a lyric from a Beatles song in one of my adult novels, and the line was "Help me if you can, I'm feeling down," and it was a very short quote, and my publisher said you'll need to get permission to use that. And about a year before I wrote that book, Michael Jackson, who was still alive at the time, had acquired the rights to all of the Beatles lyrics, and the amount he was charging was colossal. I mean, he wanted hundreds and hundreds of pounds just to quote 6 or 7 words, and it would be at the author's expense, not the publisher's. So I said, okay, well, I won't use that quote then.
It's crazy, isn't it?
Yeah.
Like you'd think the Beatles song should be in the public domain or something.
Exactly what I thought. It's a public sort of public heritage thing, isn't it? The Beatles.
It's the Beatles.
Yeah, how can that be owned by an American rock star? It just doesn't seem
it's not like you're skinting them either by plagiarising them. I think they're fine. Michael Jackson's probably fine money-wise as well.
It's only, and he's making money off of someone else's music. It's not as if he's even written it.
Well, it was funny, wasn't it? Because he bought the rights when he outbid Paul McCartney for the rights, didn't he? And they never made friends. They hated each other because it was only recently after they'd released Say 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 together, hadn't they? And they were good friends. Right. And then he dipped into the post.
You can see why.
Fell out for life.
With Michael Jackson, having to get permission from Michael Jackson to quote Beatles is one step short of having to get permission from Michael Jackson when you want to breathe, isn't it? He has bought the rights to the air.
That's
and
mental.
Until I've got written permission, I'm not allowed to breathe anymore.
Yeah. And it's not like you're trying to use one of the more obscure or, you know, I don't know, picked up a face that she kept in a jar by the door or something.
Yeah,
just,
that's a good one.
you know, just help me if you can, I'm feeling down. Probably the
trademark Michael Jackson. We don't want to get sued on Wordspace Radio.
But I got refused permission to use an REM limerick. REM lyric as well at one point. I wanted to quote something from one of their songs, and they refused permission. They don't give permission for their lyrics to be used at all. Even with payment, they wouldn't give permission. So
you don't think about that really.
It's mad how crazy some people get with copyright, though, isn't it? I think Prince is the worst.
Oh right, like, he's renowned for that, isn't he?
He's absolutely mental. Like he doesn't even like his stuff to be played on the radio, which is kind of like the place for it.
He's missing a trick there, the whole music career thing.
No,
I don't want anyone to read my books.
Yeah, you're not allowed to say his name, actually, are you? It's supposed to be the artist.
We just broken the law by doing that then.
Yeah, technically.
Whoops.
But then he chose some name that was just a symbol that you can't even pronounce.
Yeah, so the little floppily shaped weird thing was his name.
Is he still the artist formerly known as Prince?
I think so. I don't know.
That's meant.
Well, the artist currently known as Tosser.
Oh, you just did.
We'll allow that one.
Yeah.
Everyone's thinking
it's Wordspace Radio to get sued, not me, isn't it? Yeah.
We've got no money anyway.
Not yet.
You're no good suing like 3 skint students. You can have like what's left of a student loan. You might be able to afford some noodles.
But didn't McDonald's famously take some sort of impoverished students to court over something and then lost their case, didn't they? There was some libel thing that they did. And, but there's a lesson for you as a big corporation: do not sue students. You're not going to get no one will like you, and you'll get no money out of it anyway. So
I know that happened with Northern Rail. He tried to sue someone for a ticket for £5. Took him to court, got all the legal expenses. It cost them like $4,000, and then the guy who owed them £5 who wouldn't pay it, well, who offered to pay it but they wouldn't accept it, won the case.
That's great.
So they were £4,005 down. He was just laughing.
That's great. I like
come at me, Northern Rail.
That's the sort of Robin Hood story, isn't it? I like that when the small guy wins. Yeah.
I think we've completely derailed the book conversation.
Deliberate pun following on from Northern Rail and the derail.
Hey, that was no pun intended.
People think these things are scripted, but they're not, are they?
I wish I'd known. I should have taken full credit for that.
You can go back and edit that so it sounds as if you meant it all along. Yeah.
You know what to do, Katherine.
Do you want to put the conversation back on the rails again?
I don't know how. I'm still just basking in the glory of my puns.
So we've stalled now, haven't we? We're lost now. We've got a pun, and where do we go from here?
How did we get here, actually?
I don't know. I just followed you from the reception. That was, well, that joke's lost on people on radio, isn't it? Because they've got no visual idea of where we are. We could be anywhere.
It was good for us four, though. But back to your writing.
Oh yeah.
I was gonna bring it in today, but I completely forgot. Which is stupid.
I've never heard a student say that before.
But I got one of your books off Amazon, Black Cat, because the main character was called Ethan.
Oh yeah.
So because I didn't know which one to start with, and I saw it was Ethan. I was like, that's got to be. He's not.
I mean, the name's the same, but you wouldn't want to be him, would you?
No, not really. And I found it really interesting because on the first page, it's signed by you to Suzanne in 2008.
Is it? She's given that. I don't even know who Suzanne was, but she's given that book away.
She's given your book away. I just thought that would be interesting to bring up.
It wasn't to Dad. That would be worse. Dear Dad. Yeah.
Yeah, I just thought that was like, I don't know, because obviously we know you now.
Yeah.
And to get a book that you've signed a couple of years ago that someone just sold, I
know, that's disheartening, isn't it?
Yeah.
Well, I mean, you do events, that's an adult book, so I would have done events at maybe a literature festival or in a bookshop where someone's come up and got the book signed afterwards, and then clearly at some point further down the line decided to prune their bookshelves, and my book's bitten the dust, so I will have to now find out who this Suzanne is and track her down. And
So that's it. If you're listening, Suzanne, we're after you. Just watch your back.
I may have to randomly just kill people called Suzanne until I find the right one. This can be the only.
That's the
method.
only logical
Yeah.
response, really, isn't it? Just like Terminator goes down the phone book.
No court in the land would convict you, would they, for that? Really?
No.
But interestingly, there was a book came out a couple of years ago that was based around dedications at the front of books. That this person had gone trawling through second-hand bookshops and found books with interesting dedications, and some of them were like 100 years old, and some sort of scrawly bit of writing to someone on a birthday back in 1912 or something, and some of them had like sort of messages and cryptic messages, or more than just best wishes, Fred, or something. And the whole book was built around these interesting messages, and it was quite interesting to speculate the backstory behind who were these people, what was their relationship to each other, how did that book end up in a second-hand bookshop all these years later, you know.
Yeah, it struck me. I opened it and I was like, Suzanne.
Yeah.
I was like, it's just really odd, like.
Yeah.
It sounds like a cool art piece idea, actually. That or whatever book or whatever it was,
like an installation piece or something. Yeah.
Yeah, no, it's cool. I remember once buying my sister a book and writing in it to Megan. Well, here you go.
Oh, you obviously put a lot of thought into that. Yeah.
I thought it was funny.
But would it make a difference to you when you're buying a book whether it's signed by the author? Because some people seem to have a real thing about wanting a book signed by the author, but I've never understood why that is. I mean, would you buy a book if it was signed by the author? Would that mean anything more to you than if it wasn't?
I think the thing with that is that you go to the sign-ins and have a chat.
Yeah.
And then the sign-in reminds you of meeting that person.
Yeah.
I don't think it. I think it defeats the object if you buy it pre-signed.
Well, you get and sometimes authors use. I mean, I've done this. You do a signing in a bookshop, and then any books that are left over that aren't sold, you sign them, and the bookshop then puts them in the window with a little sticker on them saying "signed by the author." So the people who buy those haven't actually met you. So I think you're right. I think meeting the author does make it worth having in a way that not meeting them wouldn't.
Yeah, I'd certainly go out of my way to meet my favourite authors and then be glad to have the opportunity for them to sign a book. I wouldn't pay extra for a signed book. You know, it's very. If nothing else, they've graffitied on your book.
Yeah.
That's I mean, maybe if it was like someone spectacularly famous, like I don't know, if there was a signed Virginia Woolf, or something, I'd go for that.
Those would be collector's items, wouldn't they? They'd be real. I mean, that would sell for way more than the book was ever worth if you got.
Exactly. I mean, if you got one of them to give me, I'll take that.
I met Will Self, the author, at an event when I was in the audience, and I went to get a book signed by him afterwards. And I said to him, "Do you ever have trouble thinking what to write in a message in? Because it's I just put best wishes, and that's my standard thing. But sometimes people expect something a bit more interesting." And he said, funnily enough, he went to an event where Jeffrey Archer, the Tory politician, was signing books. He writes these thrillers, doesn't he? Crime thrillers, and he was signing his books, and Will Self happened to be in the bookshop and went over to get a book signed by Jeffrey Archer. I hated the man. I mean, Will Self's politics are on the left, and Jeffrey Archer's a Tory, and he wanted to get the book signed. And he said to Jeffrey Archer said to him, "Would you like anything particular written in there?" And Will Self, "Can you write 'Long live the Revolution'?" And Jeffrey Archer refused, apparently, because I think he realised that Jeffrey Archer writing 'Long live the Revolution' would be a real collector's item, and you could sell that for a fortune on eBay. So he refused to do that, which I think shows a lack of sense of humour that goes right to the heart of the Conservative Party.
Oh, there we go.
Relevant.
We're not getting political, are we?
Is this going out before the election?
Possibly on the election day, so this could be the decide.
Because for those of you listening at home, this is not live. It is for us, but it won't be for you. So the election may already be over by the time people hear this. So and who would have thought UKIP won? I mean, that's, Nigel Farage is Prime Minister, and how did that
Farage in charge.
Yeah.
Could you imagine? It's a terrifying thought.
It is a horrible thought, isn't it?
Yeah. What's a really good question though, because you're an author, is when, like I think Megan's hit the nail on the head with the signing of the books is more meeting the author. Is the special part. But I've always wondered, like, because you see like people on red carpets and then people like shoving a picture in front of the face and they want to sign it. Yeah. That's really like impersonal. And how I've always wondered what an author feels like if you're speaking to them, you're like, "Oh, please, by the way, could you sign my book?" Like, how do you feel? Are you flattered?
I'm sort of flattered that they want the signature, really. Yeah. I mean, one advantage of being an author is, although you might be well known within certain circles by certain readers, you're not ever famous in the way that like film stars and singers and people are famous. I mean, I can walk along the street without being recognised, whereas if I was a relatively minor character in Coronation Street, I wouldn't be able to do that. If I was in a pub or a restaurant, people would recognise me and come up and ask for autographs. So you don't get that as an author. And even your J.K. Rowlings of this world are not instantly recognisable in public in the way that someone...
They don't really have a face, do they, for most people, unless you've cared to look them up.
Absolutely, yeah. I remember quite a few years ago, I did an MA in creative writing at the University of East Anglia, and Malcolm Bradbury, who was my tutor at the time, later died, and there was a memorial service held in Norwich for him, and a lot of former students were invited along. So I'd gone there with my wife and one daughter at the time, and we were walking through the pedestrianised middle of Norwich, killing time before the memorial service. And I saw Kazuo Ishiguro, the writer, walking towards me with his wife and kids. Didn't know him, but I recognised his face from the dust jacket of his books because I'm a keen reader, and I knew he's a former student at UEA. And
Remains of the Day?
He did, Remains of the Day,
I love that book.
Yeah, a very famous film as well, wasn't it? And
I've never seen the film.
Yeah, it's really good. Anthony Hopkins plays the butler. Really good film. But he's in writing terms, in literary fiction terms, he's probably up there with Salman Rushdie and Martin Amis and Ian McEwan as being one of the big names. He's one of the big names in literature, and yet there he was walking through Norwich on a Saturday morning in the shopping precinct, not being recognised by anyone, and occasionally people might glance at him because he looked Japanese, and well, he is Japanese, which is probably why he looks Japanese. Tends to go with the territory, doesn't it? So occasionally you don't tend to see that many Japanese people walking around in Norwich, but you could tell no one really knew who he was. And I was thinking that's quite nice in a way that he can be that anonymous. So for me, to answer your question, which you asked about an hour ago, I think, I'm so flattered that people want my autograph or a signature on a book that I'm always happy to oblige. And it never happens in a way where it's intrusive. I'm not out for a curry with my mates and someone comes along, and or I'm doing something with my family and people intrude. And that never happens. It's always at an event where people are entitled to ask you to sign.
So you never had like legions of screaming women like, chasing you from taxi to taxi?
Do I look like someone who has legions of screaming women chasing me? No, that has never happened. I wait for that to happen, but I'm not holding my breath really.
Hey, we've got a budget. We could hire some actors.
That'd be great, actually. Yeah. Well, actually, I was sitting in Salts Mill at the old mill building that's got a bookshop and a diner and shops and things on the canal at Shipley. I was sitting in there having lunch with someone who was applying to do an MA actually at Manchester. I was teaching at Manchester at the time. They were applying to do an MA. So I sort of interviewed them there because we both lived sort of quite near there. And someone who knew me happened to see us and walked past, and for a joke came over to me and said, "You're Martyn Bedford, aren't you? You're the famous author." Obviously, I then played along with it and said, "Oh, I am. I'm amazed to be recognised. Thank you very much." So, "Can I please have your autograph?" And so I started to went through this whole. I mean, we're friends. We knew each other. We were playing this game, and then the guy who was applying for the MA. He said, "Oh wow!" He said, "Does that happen very often?" And I had to confess that no, actually, I know the bloke. We've known him for years. So that's as close as I got to it.
I'm sure that Joey does that on Friends to like pick up women, doesn't he?
Yeah.
He makes Chandler go, "Oh, aren't you that guy from Days of Our Lives?"
That would work brilliantly as a scene in Friends.
That's it. You're a married man, but you could have used that otherwise.
Yeah. I should do that more often. I should arrange people for a £10 fee to come and act as if they know me. In public,
really loudly so that everyone can overhear.
Yeah. Note to self, must try that as a career enhancing move.
Oh no! Well, that's a life goal for everyone.
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, on a serious note, I don't know how comfortable I'd be if I did something that did make you genuinely that famous that your ordinary life became unlivable.
It's terrifying.
I mean, David Beckham can't just go down the pub and have a pint with his mates, or go into a curry house and have a curry, can he? It'd be completely impossible. He was in Ilkley a few weeks ago last year, in fact, when the Tour de France, the Grand Départ, was running through Yorkshire. He was one of the celebrities who was going to be in Harrogate to sort of cut the ribbon or whatever they do to start the race. And I was at the dentist, as it happens, and my dentist got a message on her phone and said, "It's my daughter. She works in Betty's. They've got Victoria and David Beckham and their kids are in Betty's in Ilkley this afternoon." But they cleared the whole restaurant. They arranged beforehand. Beckham's people arranged with the owners of Betty's tea rooms in Ilkley to empty the restaurant between 3 and 5 in the afternoon, to stop serving members of the public, to turf everyone out, and just turn the whole restaurant over to Victoria and David Beckham and their kids and a couple of minders, presumably. My dental hygienist was really excited that her daughter was serving tea and sandwiches to the Beckhams. But how sad your life must be that you can't go and have tea with your kids without having to arrange for your people to empty the restaurant before you get there.
That's mad, isn't it?
Yeah.
I'd hate that.
It's unimaginable. I mean, people do they fall in love with that lifestyle though quite quickly, don't they? I think you've got to have a certain amount of ego and lots of confidence, maybe.
If you didn't have it to start with, you'd soon develop it, wouldn't you? If people start treating you in that way, it'd be very easy to become quite egotistical. And I suppose you'd grumble about it, but then if it stopped and people were no longer interested in you, you'd probably grumble about that because your career was on the skids and no one wants us anymore.
I remember seeing an interview with, I don't know who the interview was with actually, but I remember what he said. They were asking all about, and does it bother you that you can't go anywhere without being mobbed by fans? And he said, well, yeah, a bit, but I'm singing for a living and I'm doing exactly what I wanted to do, and I'm not going to complain about, it's like being president of America and complaining about wearing a tie. It just comes with the territory, doesn't it?
Unless you're Hillary Clinton, who might not need to wear one if she becomes president of America.
Well, that's true.
But then why shouldn't female presidents wear ties?
Right? Yeah, it should be a requirement. They all wear ties.
Yeah. Preferably with Mickey Mouse patterns on them or something. Yeah. So, if they can get permission from Michael Jackson.
I'd vote. Anybody with a Mickey Mouse tie, I'd vote for.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. But it's
back to that.
I've been wondering if sales of purple ties have gone down nationwide since
I've actually got a purple tie, but I don't wear it now.
Yeah, exactly. It's hard, isn't it?
We said that, didn't we? We were on the train and this man got on with a purple tie, and we were just like, Do you reckon that's just unfortunate, or does he support UKIP? And it's like, who can we trust?
Yeah, I've got like 3 purple ties that I really like, and I can't wear them now. I've got a really expensive purple paisley tie, and that's not happening.
My daughters go to a school where each school year has a different colour tie, so they can tell the year 8s from the year 7s from the year 9s, and she's in year 8 now, but that when she started in year 7, that was the purple tie year, so she's got to wear a purple tie right through her time at school now, which is very unfortunate.
We're very sorry, by the way, any UKIP supporters.
Yes.
Keep listening.
Yeah.
Like, we're not sorry.
And in fairness, we should say other political parties are available.
Yeah, to be honest, we've accidentally advertised them quite a lot.
I know, we've given them what Thatcher used to call the oxygen of publicity. We shouldn't have said
that's
nothing.
it, all publicity is good publicity. Vote Green, vote for Save the Rhinos.
The Leeds Rhinos are in danger, are they? I didn't know.
Have been hunted down.
Their natural habitat has been destroyed.
Pub's getting closed.
I think we've derailed again here.
Yeah, badly. Worse than before.
I think I might have been at fault for that one,
I don't know, it was a group effort.
Yeah.
You see, whenever you have a lecture with us, you're very good at keeping everybody on track. We're not used to this.
I'm always worried about digressing and going off at a tangent with classes, so I'm glad you think there's some pattern to them, because they don't feel like it from my end of the spectrum.
We did have an idea, but we couldn't find or come up with anything good enough. But because we were going to sort of make a joke out of it and spring it on you at the end, you always make us write, so we were going to get you to do some sort of writing challenge.
How glad I am you decided not to do that.
But we couldn't find one apart from like the 6
I'm sure we
word
can think
story.
of one. We've got time.
You've warned me now, haven't you? I didn't bring a pen with me either.
We're fine. We're students.
I'm sorry. I'm one of these writers. I must use my own pen. It's a 1936 fountain pen, and I can't possibly write with anything.
No way, because I've got a 1936 fountain pen.
But I can only write on goat skin paper. I'm afraid that's the only thing I can.
What a coincidence! Because I carry goat skin paper with me.
Who would have thought?
Yeah. This is perfect. All we need to write a test.
But the other thing is I can only write on Saturdays. Sorry.
We can't do that.
But you happen to have brought Saturday along with you.
However, if the podcast goes up on Saturday. I'm not going to get out of this, am I? So that would have actually been, it might have been quite fun, but possibly quite daunting as well.
Yeah, so we thought
it was difficult for us to think of a task that we could feasibly have you do and not end up with 20 minutes of gap on the podcast.
Writing isn't a good radio thing to do, is it?
No, not really.
Yeah, I've never understood. I tend to sort of, depending on what time I'm teaching, but I tend to drive home sort of around tea time, and there's Simon Mayo's radio programme on Radio 2. You probably all listen to Six Music, you young people, or Radio 1. You wouldn't even have heard of Radio 2. But Simon Mayo's programme, he often has a cookery slot. And I think, what is the point of doing cookery on the radio? You can't smell the food, you can't see the food, you've got no idea. You can just hear sizzling noises or bubbling noises in the background.
Yeah, and that's only if you're lucky enough that they're cooking like a loud food.
Yeah, exactly.
Doing a salad.
All right, he's grating carrot now, I assume, or cheese. Possibly could be cheese. Does grated cheese sound different to grated carrot? What is the point of cookery on the radio? A writing exercise on the radio wouldn't work really, would it? So this is why there's been talk in the past about having, these TV programs, they seem to be obsessed with getting people to do things that they're not actually very good at, like getting celebrities to ice skate or dive off a diving board or or live in the jungle and be self-sufficient and so on. And but they never do the writing one. They never get someone to go on a writing course, because it's just not good telly or good radio, is it? Watching people sitting there writing is really, really boring, isn't it? All the interesting stuff's going on inside their head, and you can't film or record that.
Or even if you watch a film about a writer or something, the fact that they're a writer is always such a small part of it. Because if it's a film about a policeman in America, they just tons of clips of driving fast cars and shooting stuff, but they're never going to do like a dramatic montage of you with pen to paper.
No. Pausing to make yourself a coffee is about as dramatic as it gets. That's why whenever they show writers in films, they're always using a manual typewriter.
Yeah, because it's a bit more...
it's a bit more sort of visually dramatic, and also it enables the writer to angrily pull a sheet of paper out when they haven't screw it up and throw it at a bin across the room, because if you're just pressing the delete button on a word processor, it's not quite as dramatic, is it? So it
doesn't quite work if you pick up your laptop and throw that in the bin. Quite expensive.
Yeah, that would be great though, wouldn't it? I used to work at the Telegraph and Argus newspaper as a journalist in Bradford, and there was we used to sit at these sort of pods of desks where there'd be 4 of us sitting around a pod, and all our PCs. You wouldn't have the sort of flat screen PC. You'd have the old-fashioned ones with quite a bit of back to them, and so we'd all be sitting there working at our PCs. And the woman opposite me had a really sort of short fuse in terms of losing her temper, and often when you work to a deadline as a journalist, it can be quite pressurised, and she was trying to get this phone call through to someone to get a quote to go with the story. The whole story was ready to run, but she needed a quote from a particular local councillor, and he was in a meeting, and she kept calling back and was continually being told, oh, he'll be free, don't worry, he'll be free in time for you to speak to him before your deadline. And we're about 10 minutes away from the deadline, and she put another call through, and he still wasn't out of this meeting. And she gave her computer, she slammed the phone down really hard to the point where it popped back off the cradle again, old-fashioned sort of phone, popped back off the cradle of the phone, and then shoved her PC clean off her desk. And me and the guy sitting opposite had to sort of dive out the way as this PC came flying across the desk towards us and landed on the ground with an almighty crash, and she just sort of stormed out of the newsroom with her. So I think you can.
It does happen.
You can show.
I'm sure we've all felt like doing that before, just not often been brave enough.
She was one of those people. She got quite angry with us as well at times. If she was in a bad mood, she'd be quite snappy with people, and so we devised this yellow, green and red hat system for her. I don't know if I've mentioned this before in any of the workshops, but we had this idea where if she was in a good mood and was approachable, she would wear a green hat, and if she was sort of heading towards being a bit cross, she'd wear an amber hat to warn us to tread carefully, and if do not go near under any circumstances, put on a red hat. And she was the one we devised this system for her specifically, you know. She wouldn't go along with that.
That's a great idea. I could think of like 11 people that I think need to employ that system. That would be brilliant.
It'd be useful.
Yeah. Well, at least you could get like text alerts from them or something, couldn't you?
Yeah, that'd be the modern equivalent of wearing a coloured hat, wouldn't it? It'd be the text
it's like, good morning, feeling bitchy today. Be great.
Yeah. But I mean, just to come back to the whole idea about the writing, how it is hard to convey. I mean, that's I think we may have covered this in one of the sessions on life writing, the piece that Jonathan Coe had written about B.S. Johnson when he wrote a biography movie. So most of the interesting stuff happens inside the person's head, and how do you possibly convey that in either visually or even when you're writing a biography as a writer, you know. So as you say, most of that's the thing that you mentioned, wasn't it, Megan, that when you have writers in a film, they're not usually doing much writing, are they? It's the stuff around them, it's their life around them that you focus on, you know. Yeah.
And even then, it's always the very romanticised idea of them being like the heavy drinking, broody, like, I don't know, their alcoholism and obsession with their new novel tore their family apart, so they've moved to a small cabin in the woods to get away from it all.
Well, that's actually probably true of quite a lot of occupations, that unless it's the job is part of the film, like a crime film where the cop is his job is what the film's about. But for a lot of occupations, they're sort of going on in the background, and it's just someone happens to go to work and do this thing, but you tidy it away in a couple of sort of short scenes and don't mention it again. And actual job-related scenes are not that common in books and films, are they? Probably because most people's jobs are actually quite dull.
Oh yeah, I suppose the reason for a book is or a movie or something is to focus on the exciting parts rather than you wouldn't actually read a book about some guy writing the book.
No,
well,
exactly.
You might. I'm trying to think of it. Does one exist?
Oh, there probably are.
There will be.
Yeah, it's always what writers resort to when they've run out of other ideas is to write a book about someone writing a book.
The amount of times I've done that in lecture, you know, in writing practices, written about not knowing what the hell to write. Yeah. And I've read them out a couple of times, and like Amina's been like, "Oh, that was really clever take on the whole thing." I'm like, "Really?" Because I was just like stuck.
Yeah, got away with that one then. Yeah. It can be a good starting point to sort of break the barrier if you're struggling to get into a piece of writing. I mean, you wouldn't necessarily run with the piece and make that the piece, but it can be a good way of getting started with a piece of writing. Or clearly, if you're in Amina's class, it can produce the finished piece as well. So at least I'm hoping Amina doesn't listen to this now. It wasn't in any way meant to be a criticism of Amina.
But Amina does listen to them, actually. She likes us on Facebook and everything. It's great.
Amina, I'm really, really sorry about that. That came out completely wrong.
So, do you ever have any trouble sort of carry on with your writing, or does the idea sort of just...
Well, I used to be a journalist, and writing newspaper stories to a deadline does train you into not getting too precious, or you can't really have writer's block as a journalist. If I turn around to my news editor or features editor and said, I'm sorry, the creative muse hasn't struck, I can't possibly produce a story by 10 o'clock unless you bring me some more goat skin and a fountain pen immediately, because they just, without all the expletives they tell you to get the thing written. So that does 13 years of that does condition you to getting stuff written. So I don't tend to suffer from writer's block in the way that some writers do. Where it tends to affect me more is if I'm writing a scene and I can't quite work out the purpose of the scene, or how I want it to work out, or what the dynamic is between the characters, or what the end point is that I want them to get to by the end of that scene. Sometimes I'll get stalled halfway through and think, well, I've started a scene, but I don't really know where I'm going with it. And it's quite hard to write a scene and make characters talk to each other if you've got no idea what the point of that scene is. So that happens sometimes. And what I usually do then is I'll go for a walk. I live in Ilkley, and I'm right near the Ilkley Moors, about 5 minutes from where I live. So I'll just stick my coat on and go for a walk across the moors for an hour or two, and hope that the idea has resolved itself in my head. And more often than not, even without actually thinking about it, just going for a walk and getting a bit of exercise, and the whole serotonin levels go up if you get a bit of fresh air and exercise, and that can put you in a different frame of mind, and you go back to your desk and suddenly the problem doesn't seem to be there anymore. So that's probably how I usually get it. The other, and this is a useful trick to sort of bear in mind for yourselves perhaps as writers as well, is at the end of the day's writing, or the hour's writing, or whatever period you've set yourself for writing, try it, if it's a piece you're going to be carrying on with later, try and leave in mid-sentence or mid-paragraph rather than get to the end of a scene or the end of a chapter, because when you get back to your desk the next time, it's a lot easier to pick up from mid-sentence or mid-paragraph than if you've come to a dead stop and you've got to start with a new scene or a new chapter. So I'll do that quite often. At the end of the day, I'll break off in mid-scene when I know what's coming next.
That's a great bit of advice that I've never heard before, actually, because a lot of the same advice gets chucked around. It's good. It gets chucked around a lot because it's good advice, but that's a cool one. I've never heard that before.
No,
so
well, I discovered it by trial and error, really, and but it works for me, and it seems to make sense that it would work for other people. So I do.
Yeah, well, I'll give that a bash, definitely.
Yeah. If it doesn't work, blame me.
Yeah, well, it's no harm, no foul, is it? Like, it's such an easy one to implement, just...
On the 5th episode of Wordspace, you were saying, well, I tried that technique that Martyn suggested, and it was complete rubbish.
Yeah, he's never allowed back on the show.
The one piece of original advice he's got to offer, and it's no good.
No, because I've asked so many writers before, like, can you give some advice on how to write? And 9 out of 10 of them give the same advice, and it's the best advice. Just the same. They always say, just read a lot and write a lot.
Well, that's one of mine as well, so I make a point of not saying that now.
I'm fine with it, and it genuinely is the best advice in the world, but...
I mean, unfortunately, that is a truism, but it gets said so often it almost loses some of its power, doesn't it? It's like, I mean, cliches become cliches because they were probably true to start with, but they've been repeated so often.
Yeah, we were saying that the other day, with cliches only cliches, because once upon a time they were really bloody good.
Yeah. Well, the same goes with advice about writing, to be honest. They just get overused, don't they? But I mean, I have to be careful about saying that when I teach creative writing courses as well, because actually what you're really saying to people is that, well, it's all right doing a creative writing course, but really there's no substitute for just writing. You'll learn far more by sitting down and writing than you will by doing my course. But of course, you can't earn a living as a creative writing tutor if you're discouraging people from signing up for your courses.
You'd be buggered if everyone took that to heart, wouldn't they? Like, is that all there is?
Yeah.
Right, forget your course then. I'm just going to go home and write a lot.
Normally it's timing. I normally tell people that after they paid their fees.
Yeah. Wait till you got at least $8 grand out of it.
And at job interviews, when people ask me about creative writing, when I apply for jobs as creative writing teachers, I mention it after I've been offered the job rather than at the interview as well. So timing's the important thing with these things.
This is good advice. That's smart. So I'll remember that.
Thank God this isn't being recorded.
Brilliant. Would you like that bit cut it out, Martyn?
No,
we can do that.
Fine. I think everyone realises it was tongue in cheek. Apart from Jeffrey Archer, who we already know has no sense of humour, or the artist formerly known as Prince.
Yeah, we've accidentally targeted some people, haven't we?
Sorry if you're listening.
Yeah.
Prince.
Didn't you know that Prince is like a mad fan of Wordspace?
Oh yeah, I've heard.
Yeah, he's because me and him are best buds.
Yeah.
Well, I gathered that. Is that who you get your goatskin paper from?
It was a birthday present.
He does seem like a person who would own goatskin paper.
He does, doesn't he? Yeah.
Who, me or Prince?
Well, both really.
Bit of both.
In fact, I wouldn't be surprised if you are Prince. I've never seen you and him in the same room together.
Point.
Very suspicious. Yeah.
That's what I like to say about Batman. I'm not saying I'm Batman. Just he's seen us in the room together.
Yeah, well, that is true. Yeah. Do you know all these references to people we've mentioned earlier makes any editing of this completely impossible, isn't it?
Yeah.
Well, if we cut that reference to Prince, we're going to have to cut that reference to Prince.
We love to challenge Katherine. She's the one that's done all of our editing so far, and she's had some challenges.
Yeah.
I think the best one was our second podcast with Phil and Chris and Max.
Yeah.
Like, you think we've gone off track here? It was like 40-minute long, complete. Not even about like.
It was just about biscuits.
I remember. I listened to that one. That was great. That one, wasn't it? It was hilarious.
The biscuit conversation was awesome. What do you think the most poetic biscuit is?
Oh, most poetic. Well,
this is an ongoing question we should ask everyone.
And I've got a bit of a thing for the chocolate hobnob, I have to say. I think it would need to be an Ian Macmillan kind of poetry. I can't imagine Emily Dickinson writing about a chocolate hobnob.
No.
In fact, they probably didn't even have.
You see, we've said a similar thing before there. We said that chocolate hobnobs were kind of more Charles Bukowski-ish.
Yeah, actually that's true. Yeah,
the kind of gritty, mardy ones that are still pretty cool these days.
Yeah. No, I think that's probably Bukowski. He'd be the one for that, wouldn't he? So.
Yeah, he's got a hobnob vibe.
That sounds like sort of strange medical condition. What seems to be the problem? Well, doctor, I've got a strange hobnob vibe. All right, we'll just drop your trousers and we'll have a look. Where's this going?
Yeah, I'm frightened to continue down that one.
Yeah. People listening thinking, thank God this is on radio and not on film.
Whilst we are on the subjects of joke, Billy likes to ask the guests, do you have a poetry joke for us? Or any sort of joke.
Any type of literature joke.
I know some really, really foul limericks, but I don't think they'd be suitable for broadcast. I know a library joke, which hasn't got any swearing in.
Oh, God, that's
sort of literature related, isn't it? Yeah. Man goes into a library. So, fish and chips, please. The librarian says, you do realise this is a library? He said, oh, sorry, fish and chips, please. No swearing, and still funny.
That's good.
That was a flashback, man, because that's my granddad's joke.
Is it?
Yeah, he's been telling me that.
Careful.
He tells me it like 5 times a year.
I can't tell you how much your mark has just gone down for both my modules. Your joke reminds me of my granddad.
Well, my granddad's cool.
He's a great guy. Well, you're saying that now, but you're in this hole and you're not going to... You didn't give that any thought at all.
I've got no filter, Martyn. Like, there's so many things that I've said in this hour that I've cringed at, to be honest. Like, words just fall.
You had potential high 2-1 first, and that's just gone straight out the window.
Oh, well.
So, yeah.
That's disappointing. Does that mean I don't even have to get up in the morning anymore?
You might as well not bother, to be honest. Yes. And the MA application you were thinking of doing next year, forget it.
That actually hurts.
Your granddad sounds like a very cool man. I think I can relate to your granddad. Do you know, worryingly, I've got several jokes that I repeat over and over again, and that's one of them. So I'm becoming like your granddad.
Yeah, it's a terrible trait, that.
Yeah. My daughters can see them coming now.
You can't see Ethan and Megan looking at me like I'm an idiot because I repeat. I've got 4 jokes.
Right, yeah, well that's about 3 more than I've got.
Yeah.
Yeah, my daughters spot them coming now and do that. Oh, yeah. And I was exactly the same when I was their age. My dad had the sort of repertoire of about 3 or 4 jokes and or anecdotes that he would say. Did I ever tell you about the time? And then you'd say, yes, you did that. And then he'd still tell you anyway.
Yeah, I do that, but it's hard not to, isn't it? Because you've started and you've got to the beginning of your story and everyone said, I've already heard it. You're like, well, I've started now, so let's finish.
It's difficult when you teach as well. It's difficult because you've got certain anecdotes that relating to the things you're doing in your sessions and I think, have I done this with this group before, or was it with the other group? Am I about to launch into the same anecdote that I told them a week ago, or was that with another group? So,
do you do what I do as well, where you've got a joke voice, and as soon as you start with the joke voice, everyone goes, I know, this is definitely a joke.
Yeah, I do that as well.
And I try not to. I try and set it up like it's a conversation, and I see everyone's eyes roll, and I'm just like, I've been caught out already.
You have to be quite careful when you go into schools to do sessions with that sort of 14, 15-year-olds, because sometimes quite often they take things on a literal level. So if I say something that's meant to be ironic, or here we've been talking and we're all pretty much aware of when we're saying the opposite of what we actually mean about things, but with a room of 14 and 15-year-olds, sometimes they do take things on a literal level, particularly when you come in as a guest author. They assume you're going to be serious and worthy and everything you say is absolutely true. So a couple of times I've said things that were meant to be ironic or funny or taken the opposite way, and people looked at me and went, oh my God. And he's murdered his brother. Because one of the things I do in schools is to mention bizarre questions that I've been asked on previous school visits, one of which was, did you write your novel Never Ending because you felt guilty about killing your brother? and I've mentioned this in schools, and they've said, he killed his brother. I haven't even got a brother. I killed him. So
well, not anymore.
Although I must resurface the patio at some point.
How did that question come up?
Oh, it was just really weird. The schools have sort of strange... You have a Q&A session and there will always be someone who asks something you've never been asked before. I mean, you get the usual ones. Where do you get your ideas from? Do you write with a word processor, or did you always want to be a writer, or all the usual sort of questions, but there's always one question that you've never been asked before. You know, like if you could colour your hair any colour, what colour would you dye it? You know, and those sort of things.
Which is?
Well, I threw that back at the students and said, what colour do you think would suit me? And they said pink. I mean, clearly they hadn't looked at me because I haven't got any hair. So
you've got enough hair.
Well,
you could dye that pink.
Billy, this 2 1's going down.
You almost sort of fail here. I mean, that's if you've got a pink scalp, why would you dye your hair pink to go with it? Surely you'd have a contrasting colour. But what was the other one? Oh, this was by email. I got an email from a student in London who I've got a website with a contact page, and the student emailed me, 14-year-old student from a school in London, saying, for my English assignment, I have to write a 500-word review of your novel Never Ending. Could you please tell me what your novel's about?
Nice.
I know students are trying to get out of doing work, but I replied, said, no, I'm sorry, I can't. Try reading it. You know?
You've got to admire the balls for that, though. That's brilliant.
Yeah, that's pretty impressive.
Yeah, I mean, at least you tried.
She's probably tried that with loads of authors, and on a percentage basis that 1 in 10 might actually help her out, and she could do that. You know, so.
We should try that now.
Yeah.
Hi Martyn. What should I write from a portfolio?
Yeah. Try that with some of the texts you've done for the other modules, you know. Yeah. Or maybe not. Still not with 17th century literature, because those writers are probably no longer available, are they?
Oh dear. I feel like we've been a little bit unimaginative with the questions now. We should have come up with something. What's your opinion on unicorn in three adjectives?
I think they are my favourite mythological creature. And I particularly like them when I'm playing that game with my children, when we're trying to get them engaged in a long walk and they don't want to be walking, and we've run out of chocolate chip cookies to bribe them with. Chocolate chip cookies, of course, which would never be written about in a poem. Yeah. And so we'll do the think of an animal beginning with the letter A, and we'll all go around and think of an animal. And when you get to you've only really got unicorn, and there's some strange kind of cattle type thing that in Africa that begins with a U as well, ubud or something like that.
There's loads of animals that begin with U. It could be like an ugly cat, ugly bear.
You've clearly never played that game. Adjectives are banned in our version of it. So unicorn, and of course you take turns, and if it's your go first, you bag the unicorn, and no one else has got an animal together. So unicorns are a lifesaver. I can't tell you how many times they've cropped up on our walks. Never actually seen them. Has anyone seen one? Have any of you seen a unicorn?
I've seen a rhino.
The blue and yellow shirt and the number 15 on his back. Look at that, it's Kevin Sinfield galloping across the African Serengeti.
That I'd like to see. Okay, we should probably. Do you want to call it like a 10-minute wind down?
Well, I'm happy to wrap up whenever you are. It's if you think you've got enough. I mean, I've really enjoyed it, and it's been good fun.
Yeah, it's been awesome. Yeah, glad to have you on.
And we've covered a couple of seconds of serious stuff in there somewhere, which is good, I think, isn't it?
Well, we could bring it back to if you've got anything to plug.
Oh yeah, buy my books. Is that enough information?
That's we'll put all the links in the description.
Do you want to reel off all the titles?
Well, the 2 novels for teenagers and young adults, which are available to teenagers and young adults, but anyone who's ever been a teenager and young adult, are Flip and Never Ending. They're definitely worth buying, and all of my adult fiction. If you go to my website, which is martynbedford.com, you'll find details of all of the books. And the only trouble with the adult ones is a lot of them are out of print now because they're quite old. I mean, the first one was published in 1996, which is a long time ago. So you probably weren't even born then, were you? Or you were just about being...
I was a 1-year-old.
Right, so yeah.
I was 3.
Right, so you wouldn't have been reading adult fiction at that time, would you really?
Funnily enough, my girlfriend for my birthday bought me Acts of Revision.
Did she? Right, yeah.
But I've not got around to reading it.
Oh, right, okay, well I won't spoil it for you too much.
Yeah, because the uni dropped 8 20th century literature novels on us.
Right. I'm slightly disappointed that you put your coursework ahead of reading for pleasure. It's disappointing, yeah. But I mean, that's the only downside with the adult fiction is they're mostly out of print now because they've been out for so long. But you can get them second-hand through Amazon. That's where most people track them down. And very occasionally you find them in second-hand bookshops signed by Cyberpunk. My dad, funnily enough, you mentioned Black Cat in finding that in with a signature in it. My dad went. He was a long-distance walker when he retired, and he walked from Land's End to John O'Groats over about 6 weeks. And he got to this bookshop in Wick, which is about the penultimate day of the walk before the last leg up to John O'Groats. And he reached work about 4 o'clock in the afternoon, and there was a second-hand bookshop there, and he'd finished the book he'd been reading while he was on the walk, and went in to have a look for another one, and saw a copy of Black Cat there. Yeah. And thought, look, I'm in the far north of Scotland, and I found my son's book in this bookshop. So he got the book off the shelf and took it up to there was a sort of woman at the desk who was about 19, 20 years old, who was behind the counter, and he took this book up to her and said, and he just finished a day's walking at the end of about 6 weeks of walking, where he hadn't really had a proper shower or change of clothing for about a month, and he's standing there in this sweaty t-shirt with these shorts and sort of looking a bit grubby, and says, my son wrote that book. And of course she immediately thought, this 75-year-old bloke standing here in a sweaty pair of shorts is trying to hit on me in some creepy kind of way by telling me this ridiculous story that his son wrote this book, you know. And he then realised that she was being a bit creeped out by this and didn't, and sort of realised he said, no, look, and then he started fishing around for his bus pass to show her his name was Bedford. But of course his bus pass was in his pocket, which made him then look like he was fumbling around in his shorts. Produces the bus pass and shows her, by this time she just wants to run away from him. Is there a panic button that I need to press here? You know? But eventually he showed her the name Bedford, and she finally came around to the idea that perhaps he's not a sort of maniac, and he really has got a son called Martyn Bedford who wrote this book, you know. But
brilliant.
Anyway, so but I've never come across one of my own books in that situation, but my dad did, which is quite nice for him, really. So
that's good.
That is pretty cool. So you've never just randomly found your own book in a bookshop?
Oh, I've seen them in second-hand bookshops before now. Yeah, actually, that's not quite true. In fact, well, it's not even completely true to say that I've never seen them in second-hand bookshops. I do check them actually to make sure they're not ones I've signed to people as well. What I've never done, which some writers have had, is see someone reading my book actually on a train or a bus or some public
That
place.
must be really nice, actually, to see.
Yeah.
Could you imagine that?
My literary agent said he was on a bus in London one time, and bizarrely he was reading the typescript of my next novel, which I'd sent to him the previous week. This was back in the days when you sent stuff in hard copy to agents rather than email attachments. So he's sitting on this bus in London travelling into work, reading the manuscript of my next novel, and the person sitting next to him was reading the published version of my previous novel, and he said that's a really a first that he's never had happen before, and so it's never happened directly to me, but I sort of heard about it indirectly.
That's surreal.
He said he had to really sort of stop himself from nudging this person, saying, I'm his agent, and this is his new book here. You know, he sort of thought that might seem a bit naff, really, so he didn't do that. But,
that's fantastic.
But then, I mean, I suppose if you're a really big selling author, like if you're Gillian Flynn and you've written Gone Girl, or you know, whatever the current, if you're John Green, I imagine John Green's probably seen teenagers reading his books in public quite a lot. But so I think you need to have some sort of mega sales to get to that stage, really. Don't you?
Blockbuster movie out of the book. And,
we'll make sure we sit around uni reading one of your books.
That would be good. Product placement. Yeah.
You've actually recently read Flip, haven't you?
Yeah, just finished it the other day. Really enjoyed it.
Bearing in mind how low your mark has got, really enjoyed it, has nudged you back up a bit.
Oh, nice one.
Yeah.
Do I get nudged up like a peg for each one of your books that I read?
Yeah,
how's that?
I enjoyed Black Cat.
Yeah, that's good. Yeah. We're dealing with Billy's marks at the moment. It's like triage. We have to deal with the victim that's in most danger of dying here. We'll get round to you later. Yes.
I'm safe.
So who do you hate more right now, me or Susan? it's got to at least still be Susan,
I think
right?
it was Suzanne, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Suzanne, yeah. I've got nothing against Susan. Suzanne.
I'm sorry.
Yes.
Same thing.
Yeah. Suzanne, clearly, because she gave one of my books away, which you, at least as far as I know, you haven't done.
That's okay. So I'm at least safe until you've assassinated.
It's gone to a good home. At least, I feel.
But I should mention for those listening who are students who are worried that their marks can go up and down with such easy sort of things. I do try and mark more seriously than that. You know, it's really it's only Billy that'll make that sort of make the exception for you.
Oh, so glad to be me right now. That was a long plug, but it's been wonderful having you on the show.
Well, I've really enjoyed it. It's been good fun. Thank you for inviting me.
Yes, hurry up and write another book, and then we'll have you on for the next one.
All right.
When is this book coming out? Actually,
March next year in the UK. So
Well, we'll probably have you on again, maybe to talk about its release and all that. Maybe read something else from it, or if you want to read anything from your other books.
Yeah, I'll be happy to do that. I'll be happy to come back when you've run out of interesting people to bring on. I'll be happy to come back. Yeah. So, brilliant. Thanks very much for having me on.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Bye, guys.